It's my pleasure and honor to introduce Hatem Naguib, the Vice President Cloud Networking and Security at VMware, who's going to give you a little perspective from VMware.
Thank you very much. Thank you to Lee and to Mark and to the Palo Alto Networks team for inviting us for this first user conference for Palo Alto Networks. Tremendously exciting time. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking to you a little bit about VMware and where our vision has been and how it coalesces so nicely with what Palo Alto Networks is trying to do. For VMware, and I'll start with a little history lesson just as Lee did. In 2008, about 25% of workloads were running in virtualized environments. And we worked very diligently with many of you as our customers to help bring that up to about 60% of workloads now running in a VM inside many data centers. And our goal as VMware is to really bring that to over 90%. So only the rarest of workloads will not be running in a virtualized infrastructure. With that, we've been able to really enable an enormous amount of operational change within the context of the data center that I think many of you have been able to experience, both good and bad. 2008, if somebody needed a new workload, that had to come with a server. That server needed to be provisioned. We talked about weeks, sometimes months of being able to get all that set up within the context of the data center. With virtualization and being able to really map a virtual machine, we've been able to reduce that to days and hours, getting that virtual machine provisioned. But as we moved those virtual workloads more into a production environment, we needed to really look more conscientiously at the other elements that came together with that. So I wasn't just thinking about that virtual machine as an independent entity. I had to think about the tiers of storage that need to be mapped to it, the network rules and policies and security rules and policies that needed to be mapped to it, and how I was going to manage and monitor that infrastructure. And what we saw happening with many of our customers is that what took a few minutes to provision from a VM perspective went back to taking weeks when we put all of the appropriate rules and policies and configurations associated with it out to the data center. And many of our customers came back and said, we really need to bring that down to minutes and seconds. And we started talking to them about the context of what we call a virtual data center as a container for those workloads that can map all of the appropriate services associated with it. And with that virtual data center, we started talking about a vision of where we think the data center should go, where we looked at the software-defined data center as being the cornerstone of where that vision is. And what that really talks about is all infrastructure is virtualized and made available as a service for the end customer. The control of this is managed by software so that we can remove the encumbrances that occur by having to manually and physically monitor and manage our infrastructure today. And many requirements come to us as part of that as we look at how do we define that software-defined data center. We look at standardization as being a critical component. Customers are now moving to standardized pods of network, compute, and storage working together to be able to deploy out into the data center. Has to be holistic, covering as many of the workloads that we've got as possible within the context of the data center. Adaptive, programmable, being a key component of that. Automated, being a key component of the software-defined data center. And finally, resilient. In the most advanced data centers today, hardware failure doesn't cause a problem because the systems are designed from a software perspective to take into consideration that hardware will fail at some point, but the workloads can continue running. So as we bring all that together into the context of the software-defined data center, we've got to bring management, compute, storage and availability, and network and security together in an automated, pooled, and abstracted way for our customers to be able to leverage for any workload running in the context of that. As customers begin embarking on leveraging the software-defined data center, there are a lot of barriers that kind of slow us down. And one of the key barriers that has happened is that in the context of networking, that barrier has really limited the ability of where we can provision our VMs, the time it takes to put new VLANs or constructs into the data center has been slowed. Our mobility of where we can put VMs and workloads is limited by how we've configured that network and the security policies that we've associated with it. We've got a very hardware-dependent infrastructure within the context of our data centers today. And it's operationally intensive, logging into CLIs to try and manage or looking at thousands of rules in order to figure out how all of that can map to a virtualized infrastructure. So VMware believes very strongly that we have to look at, just as we did on the server architecture, an abstraction layer that allows us to virtualize the memory, the CPU, the hard disk. We have to look at the data center in the context from a networking perspective to be able to virtualize the network and add the appropriate security associated with it. And with that network virtualization, and part of that network virtualization comes from the VMware stack that we've had for several years available to our customers, but also the Nicira acquisition that we recently acquired about 3 months ago into VMware. We're looking at how we can implement a network virtualization construct for our customers to be able to have a programmatic provisioning of that network, place any workload anywhere, eliminate any of the limitations that occur with mobility, make it absolutely hardware independent. Just like today in a server virtualization environment, there's no dependency on which brand of server that you use. It just needs to be x86 from a VMware perspective. We want to do the same thing on the networking side and, of course, make it operationally efficient. And part of that strategy is really to be able to deliver that network virtualization platform that allows customers to create layer 2, layer 3 networks and put upon them all of the appropriate security policies and layer 4 through 7 services that they want to manage. But for VMware, one of the key tenets of that is to be able to offer that in the context of an ecosystem. So just as you see, we have a virtualization platform on there and an API interface that allows for customers to either programmatically manage it or our partners to be able to integrate into it. It is core to us to be able to provide to our customers the ability to leverage the best of what we can get from a virtualization perspective and best of breed technologies like next generation firewalls that come from Palo Alto Networks to be able to offer those so that they can be implemented as a service in the construct of a software-defined data center. So we look at our VDC here that we showed in the previous slide, and we can take that workload and map to it, and through our cloud management system, add that workload, and then be able to offer those services automatically attached to that virtualized data center, integrated in the constructs that we've provided on that virtualization platform from VMware. And that is, in essence, really the highlight of what the software-defined data center really brings to bear. And working together with Palo Alto Networks, we're very excited about bringing that to you as customers and driving that into the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much. I hope all of you caught the lasers on that last slide. That was a key part. So I had to do it. Thank you so much. So it's amazing to me when we look at sort of the product launch that we're doing and your story. It's amazing to me how aligned it seems that we are.
I think that's very true. It's actually, we put the decks together but didn't actually work together on the decks, and I'm shocked by how seamless that they are. But frankly, a lot of our joint customers really tell us the exact same things, is that I really want to be able to accelerate the adoption of virtualization, and I really want to be able to take the security policies that I've put so much effort into making sure from a physical perspective are tightly aligned with the business needs, that I want to map those onto a virtualized infrastructure.
Yeah, I think it's all the people here that, we hear the feedback from when they talk to us about their needs, and you probably hear the same thing, and so it's probably logical that we end up in the same place. But yeah, that's great. So from your perspective, how does this help them then?
I think there's several key points. So talking about security in the context of virtualization, I think is everybody does it. But when we look at the announcement that Palo Alto Networks did today, I think it's important to highlight two critical components. Is that number one, the software-defined data center is a very workload-centric model, which means that we've really got to look in the context from a VMware perspective at how the workloads manage to the infrastructure. And I think one of the key differentiators that Palo Alto Networks does is it's a very workload-centric model in terms of how you look at security. And I think the other important aspect of it is the APIs are going to be absolutely critical in being able to drive a software-defined data center that we strongly believe is going to come from the industry, not necessarily just come from a single vendor. And working closely with you on those APIs and making sure we have the tight integration, but also that differentiated value that the customer can be able to perceive, I think is going to be a really important thing, which is why we're excited to be working with you.
Yeah. Again, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
This is exciting for us, and it's great to have you here to help tell the story.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.